this is the season when people pour out of the tube stations and come off the buses to go to Lord's cricket ground. It also happens to be the season when quite a lot of pressure is put on the LJS Rabbis to shorten their sermons so that congregants can nip over the road for the Lord's cricket ground cricket matches. Sadly, as you probably know, those cricket matches have been postponed or cancelled. So as we enter this season, we thought you might be missing those sporting events over the road at Lord's, and Igor and I decided we would go into bat in a conversation with a number of different questions for each other. So Igor, this is a bit off script, but I just thought I'd ask you, do you play cricket in Russia? Did you ever learn cricket as a child?
Well, maybe it's a stereotypical Jewish answer, but I will answer with a question. Have you ever seen a Russian cricket team? Probably not, and I think there is a reason for it. Because if Russians play cricket, I think it's better that nobody sees it. No, and no, cricket is not very popular in Russia, and it's a part of my plans for immersion into British culture to learn cricket's laws. And I know that they're called laws and not rules already, so I'm already halfway there.
Well, you know more than me, certainly. So that definitely wasn't your first sporting memory. What was your first Jewish memory, Igor?
I need to start from a little bit with the history, with explaining my family situation to fully answer this question. I come from a mixed family. So part of my family is Christian, which belongs to so-called old believers or old ritualists, which kept their tradition after the split of Eastern Orthodox Church in the 17th century. And the equivalent of this church is in Judaism is Haredi Judaism, very, very strict in the approach to religion. My Jewish part is originally from Ukraine, from cities Kiev and Odessa. So, and because they were centers of Jewish life, everything, so they were exposed to all sorts of Judaisms. So Reform Judaism was very much part of these communities. But shortly before the Second World War, one of my relatives got a good job and was able to move some of his family to the Urals, including my great-grandparents, I believe. So my parents were born there in the city called Chelyabinsk in the Urals. And I was not brought up Jewish because I think it is important to understand that it was Soviet Union. So, and it was more important to be a good person than a good Jew or a good Christian in terms of the ideology. In fact, I don't see anything bad in this ideology in general, but in this particular part of the ideology, which put it this way. So I think it's also, my parents were not very religious, not observant. So a good way to illustrate it is to share an anecdote from one of my friend's family. So when my friend's father during Pesach once told his friend, so I heard that there's a Jewish festival today called Pesach. So let's celebrate. Let's go and have a beer. And of course, beer is forbidden on Pesach because it's chametz. But I think it explains a lot about what it meant for Jews in Soviet Union, for many Jews in Soviet Union to be Jewish. They knew something, but didn't really know what to do, didn't really know how to celebrate. So religion was more on a cultural level. So, for example, when people had a book with a Jewish name in it, so it was considered as a Jewish book. Of course, because of the censorship of Soviet Union, it wasn't. That was often as much as people could get in the official bookshops. So if we are talking about my earliest Jewish memory in general, I think it was me eating Easter eggs with matzah. So somehow my grandma always had matzah at home, even during the Soviet Union. So, but that was my earliest Jewish memory. My first meaningful encounter with Judaism was much later. It was when I was 10. So the eating eggs with matzah, it was when I was 5 or 6. That's what I remember. But that's it. That was all my Judaism before I was 10. When I was 10, I went to a summer camp, the Jewish summer camp. My grandma saw an advert somewhere and suggested to my parents to send me to this camp. And I have to say, it was a life-changing experience for me. It was then when I felt a part of something bigger than myself. I felt that there is a core of tradition and values in Judaism. And just some 20 years later, I became a rabbi. But it all started at this summer camp. And what's really significant for me, that the director of that summer camp from 20 years ago, his name is Daniel, now attends every year the summer camp which I organize for Russian-speaking Jewish families. So, and it's just a very significant moment and the detail for me.
Extraordinary. An extraordinary journey, really, from the Urals to the Liberal Jewish Synagogue and Leo Baeck College in London.
Yes. Yes. Well, it's just my life. I don't think it's extraordinary, but I hope somebody will find it not very boring. I have a question to you, Alex. So if you had an opportunity, this is the question really about you and how to understand you, less about your Jewish journey. So if you had an opportunity to spend a day with anybody in the world incognito, so that you would be able to see their real life, who would you spend it with?
Well, I found this question really difficult to answer, Igor, because I'm going to make a confession now. I'm quite a solitary person and I don't mind my own company. Although, of course, during the lockdown, I've really missed the encounters that we have from day to day with members of our congregation and with others. So the idea of being a fly on the wall in someone's life, maybe I'm not so curious that I don't get excited about that. I also had to wrestle with the fact of whether you meant me to answer about somebody who was dead or alive. Because when I started to think about it, I started to think that I'd really love to understand how somebody like Martin Luther King or Gandhi or Abraham Joshua Heschel or Greta Thunberg have sustained and keep their passion for social justice going. You know, Heschel's passion was to save Judaism from oblivion. He feared that his generation would be the last to cherish the legacy of our ancestors. And so he held on to the obligation to instill into a younger generation the will to be Jews, as he put it, today, tomorrow, and forever. This idea that being a Jew has absolute significance and it has to be supremely relevant. Eternity, he said, has to infuse our daily living. And when I started to think about my answer to you, I thought, well, this is a bit strange maybe to mention only men in my answer. And there are plenty of women who actually are probably more responsible for anyone than keeping the flame of Jewish life burning. And so thinking about our Torah reading today and the book of Deuteronomy, which you read from so beautifully, I thought maybe I would like to shadow the prophetess Huldah in the Book of Kings. She is said to have discovered a book in the temple, which is thought to be the book of Deuteronomy. She showed this book to the king, Josiah, and it was Huldah, as a prophetess, who validated this text, and she gave it authority and she gave it sanctity. And so in many ways, she's another individual who had the confidence to present a text that would also bring about social justice, thinking about the laws in Deuteronomy. Of course, based on the Deuteronomy text, Josiah then produced and introduced his reforms. And possibly without those reforms, we wouldn't be here today. Thanks to Huldah.
Thank you. And it's yeah, it's true that it's so difficult to think about social justice, especially when you feel relatively small and insignificant in the huge world today. And how can you keep the flame on this justice burning inside you and not give up? And thank you for that. It's
Igor, can I ask you a question? You mentioned about books with Jewish name in it that was sort of considered Jewish. But if you were on a desert island and could take only one book, which Jewish book would you take with you? And why would you take that?
Well, I found this question probably the most difficult to answer among your questions, and I think it's fair to say that we did have each other's questions beforehand, and so that we did have a chance to prepare a little bit. There is a very good compendium of Jewish quotes from Talmud. Do you know what it is, Alex?
A compendium.
Compendium of Jewish quotes from Talmud.
Go on.
It's called Tanakh. Yeah. So, and of course, it's very often this joke is presented in a very rude way towards yeshiva students who mainly learn Talmud and not so much Tanakh. So if you learn Talmud, you will see lots of quotes. So it brings in lots of quotes from the Torah, from prophets and other books of Tanakh and other rabbinic literature, and try to create an encyclopedia of Judaism. But of course, if you don't know the context from which the quote from Tanakh is taken, it's often the context brings the beauty, that brings so much to the text of Talmud. And as was an example of a prayer which I quoted today. So I think that when Talmud quotes Tanakh, it doesn't always intend to quote the precise line, but it often quotes the whole chapter or the context, a paragraph before and a paragraph after. And that's really important. I wish I could say that, oh, I don't need Tanakh because I know it by heart. But perhaps it will be Tanakh anyway, because I think this is the core of. It's not very unusual answer. It's not very creative answer, but I think it's an honest answer, because I think that it brings a very good structure into your life, because it has these weekly Torah portions and haftarot and the poetry and all possible genres of literature in it. And it also brings you a really good structure in life, which I think you will really need in the desert island.
It's a bit of an unfair question, because in the radio program, Desert Island Discs, they give you anyway the Bible and the complete works of Shakespeare, which you quoted from this morning. You quoted the Hamlet. Mm-hmm. So I think Tanakh is a good answer in many ways.
Oh, thank you. So a similar question to you, but not about the books, but about Jewish festivals. So if you had to choose only one Jewish festival for the rest of your life, what festival would it be, and why?
Well, it's not a very seasonal answer, but for this time of the year, but actually it would be Sukkot. I think it's an incredibly beautiful festival. Each symbol, the building of the sukkah, the arba minim, you know, the lulav, the palm branch, the willow, the myrtle and the etrog, their fragrance and all the symbolism that's associated with them. I love that time of the year. I love standing in my little wooden sukkah, which is very fragile, decorated with a few branches, and sipping my early morning cup of tea in the autumn sunshine. And of course, it's a festival that brings us very close to nature, outside, contemplating the beauty of the dying year and the transient fragility of all life. And I think also, most importantly for me, it points the way towards a world in which we are directed to care for the environment rather than consume and exploit it. So it has both moral and spiritual significance for me. So it would be Sukkot.
Yeah, I quite like Sukkot, and as far as I know, the Sukkot probably was had the connotations and meanings of what is now attributed to Yom Kippur, because there is a famous saying that yes, we have this imagery of the gates which close during the day of Yom Kippur, and the Yom Kippur is the last moment to repent. But after Yom Kippur, we always say, well, actually, it is not the last moment. The gates still remain open, so don't worry. You still have at the end until the end of Sukkot. Probably it's wrong to say it now.
It's very appropriate that you bring up this subject now, because of course, as you said earlier, you know that the Haftarah reading sends us on a journey of 7 weeks towards Rosh Hashanah. I'm going to ask you one last question, then we probably need to stop because of our timing. Yes. This is a prepared question, but I want to add on something which I know you can answer, just for the benefit of our members and all those watching our service. I know that music plays a really important part in your life. I wondered if you could say something about what its significance means for you, and when it's part of our prayers and liturgy. And also just wondered if you could just end by explaining to our congregation how you put our PowerPoint and all the music together for our services each week.
Well, it is a very important question, but it's more than just about music. It's more just about the liturgy. It's about really values and beliefs and what you think is important during the prayer for this particular community, because communities are different. There is when I read this question, it reminded me of a nice joke which I really like. When a community, a synagogue, is advertising for a new role of a rabbi, and it says in the advert, so a progressive, vibrant, large community is looking for an energetic, charismatic, enthusiastic rabbi who would inspire our community to stay exactly as it's always been. And I think that sometimes music can serve as a reflection of the community's values. For example, if music is the same week after week and the community is really against any change, I think it can be a marker. It can show you that the community is quite intolerant to change in general, and I think that music it has so deep meaning for people, and people get attached to the music, not only the words, that it serves as a indicator for the community's beliefs. So if somebody told me 10 years ago that I will be a rabbi in the synagogue with an organ and a professional choir, I would probably laugh, to be honest, because I grew up in a community with a guitar and a communal singing, not always very good ones, but certainly a loud one. So one of my teachers used to say that a good singer is a loud singer, so not necessarily the one who sings in tune. So I grew up. So the predominant style of music was in my community is what I would call Disney music or a Hollywood music. What's the style of liturgy? So easy to learn, easy to join in, not too hard to play. And I can see a huge value in this style. It creates a sense of a community when you're all present in the same room, because it really creates belonging, sense of belonging. Then I went to, as a part of my rabbinic journey, I had to learn English. And of course, I went to Jerusalem to learn English. Where else? And I went to a CY, conservative yeshiva. So I spent 1 year in a conservative movement where the style of music there is traditional Jewish unaccompanied, which is called Chazanut style, which is a traditional style of music. The LJS, which I moved, which I am in now, is, I would call it, inspired by a classical reform style, but not only. It's just inspired by it. It means that some tunes are written for professional singers, and it is difficult for people to join in sometimes. So, but having said that, the most profound prayer spiritual experience I had in my life was during a solo of a professional singer, accompanied by a choir and organ. So I can see value and I can pray in all these environments. And I think it's quite an important for to understand that I can adjust, I can see value in all these styles. But when it comes to the LJS and particular LJS community style, I think that in a way our synagogue is a bit better prepared for online services during the coronavirus. Because those communities which are more used to communal singing are losing a lot nowadays. Because when you're just on Zoom and you have to, and your microphone is muted, and you don't have this environment of singing, of communal singing around you. But our music can still be spiritual. It's not the same, but almost the same as in the sanctuary, which I believe that it's really, really helpful for people. And this is why it leads me to the answer in the question why our prayer looks like it is today. So there are two questions which we need to think, which we had to think in the beginning. One is, what makes the LJS service an LJS service, a distinctive LJS service? And there are two things. These are maybe three. Sidur Lev Chadash, so our prayer book, and this is why we didn't type prayers, but we included the screenshots of the prayer book as it is in the book. The second one is probably our sanctuary, because the environment of the synagogue is beautiful and really helps you to concentrate. And the third one is music. So, and all three aspects which were brought together, I think, are reflected in the service. So the main focus is not on the service leaders, but on the prayer book. So when we share the screen, the most of the page is a prayer book. For several reasons, because I believe that prayer is about prayer and not service leaders mostly. And also because some people read it from their phones, from small screens, and we have to have it large. And the music is pre-recorded. So it means that the pianist, Martin or team normally, play the music, play piano, and record the piano in their homes. Then they send it to singers, one of our singers, and they record the voice, the main part, or sometimes two parts, at their home, and then it all goes to audio editor to the, in our case, it's Graham Carpenter, who mixes it all together. And then it goes to me, and I embed it into the PowerPoint presentation. And this is basically every week. This is what happens every week.
Thank you so much, Igor. And thank you as well for just explaining that last bit, just how labor intensive the preparation for these services are. I'm going to bring it to a close now and let you conclude our service with the concluding prayers.
And I can see that some people would like to ask their questions in the chat. And perhaps you can do it, and we will repeat maybe one time in late August also, but we will include some of your questions as well. So you can either email it to one of us or to put it in the chat, and I will save them. And this is for those who are watching this service, and we will include these questions later.